Trust a few, fear the rest. This was the grim word of advice that came along with the first live-action X-Men movie that was released in the year 2000. Based on the classic Marvel comics, X-Men follows two groups of mutants, one led by Professor Xavier at his school for gifted mutants, and the other being the Brotherhood of Mutants led by the sinister Magneto, who sees mutants as the superior species who have suffered too long at the hands of normal humans. Living in a world that doesn't fully trust mutants and holds prejudice towards them, Xavier wants to create a calm between mutants and humans, whereas Magneto wants to transform the entire human race into mutants. The adventure kickstarts when the mysterious Wolverine gets attacked by Magneto's Brotherhood of Mutants, where it's learned that Wolverine is a mutant with metal claws who can self-heal. But is it Wolverine Magneto really wants, or the mysterious teenage mutant runaway known as Rogue?
Well, if you've seen the movie, you already know the answer to that. So, why'd I ask? Clearly I'm just wasting time. Anyway, I'm not Minty today. Today I'm Bulge-verine. And we're going to look into 10 things that you didn't know about the original X-Men movie. So let's check it out.
Number 10. The origins of X-Men. Although the first movie came out in 2000, the X-Men's origins go all the way back to the groovy days of 1963. The story explores a group of heroes known as mutants, meaning they carry the X gene, which gives them superhuman abilities. X-Men was the creation of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. At the time of the story's creation, Lee and his Marvel company was having great success with heroes such as Spider-Man, the Incredible Hulk, the Fantastic Four, and Iron Man. For his next comic book title, Lee wanted to make another superhero team, another group, but didn't want to have to once again go through the hustle and bustle of having to explain how they got their powers. Lee felt that it just wouldn't have worked if everyone in the team was bitten by a radioactive spider or exposed to gamma rays. So he came up with the idea that the X-Men were born with their powers, on the account that they were mutants. Mutants who had been schooled by Professor X and guided to be a source of help to the human race. The original title of the comic was The Mutants, but it was felt that readers may not know what a mutant is. The name X-Men came to be because these are characters with extra powers. Extra powers, as in X-Men. It is said that real social issues of the time, like the civil rights movement, was a huge source of inspiration for the X-Men, given that a major focus on the story is prejudice that the X-Men encounter from members of society who aren't like them, and fear them. The original lineup of X-Men included Cyclops, Marvel Girl, who would become Jean Grey, Angel, Iceman, and Beast, before he would be covered in blue fur. And the team would face off against Magneto's Brotherhood of Mutants, which originally consisted of Toad, Quicksilver, the Scarlet Witch, and Mastermind. Over the years, X-Men would feature many memorable storylines, such as the Dark Phoenix saga, as well as many memorable characters, including Wolverine, who, although first appeared in the Incredible Hulk comic 180 in 1974, would become a hugely influential character in the X-Men saga. Number 9. An X-Men movie had been in the pipeline ever since the mid-80s. X-Men may have been an instant success on the printed page, with the comics being fully embraced by readers. It was in fact a long journey to get their cinematic adventures off the ground. The origins of the X-Men movie can be traced as far back as early 1984. A potential X-Men movie was being eyed up by movie company Orion Pictures, who incidentally that very year had great success with The Terminator. An X-Men script was written by Marvel writers and editors Roy Thomas and Jerry Conway. However, the production came to a dead end when Orion Pictures then suffered financial issues. Jump a few years later, and Stan Lee was negotiating with fellow production company Karolko Pictures to make an X-Men movie. This unmade attempt would have been produced by James Cameron, as well as being written and directed by Catherine Bigelow, with Bob Hoskins being the #1 choice for Wolverine, which, yeah, I can actually see that. However, just like Orion Pictures, Corolco also suffered financial issues, with the company going bankrupt. And so the X-Men rights went back to Marvel, and instead Cameron and Bigelow would produce and direct the surfer action movie Point Break. Marvel then offered the rights to Columbia Pictures, in the hopes that they might be interested in making an X-Men movie. Sadly, they were not.
Wow, it seems that this film just could not get off the ground. If only there was, a popular X-Men cartoon to really jumpstart the movie.
Number 8. The early 90s cartoons set things in motion. In the early 90s, the X-Men brand had a resurgence in popularity thanks to the cartoon series based off the comics. The show debuted in 1992 and lasted till 1997. The animated series was actually my introduction to the X-Men, and honestly I loved the show and really appreciated how it explored dark and mature themes, some of which even felt quite disturbing at the time. Nope, X-Men wasn't a fun, happy-go-lucky, sugary bowl of cereal cartoon. Nope, this cartoon dived into some pretty intense subject matter. I also loved all the different characters and how they all have their own look and powers, as well as clashings of personalities. It wasn't like, say, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or the real Ghostbusters, where they all had the same look and abilities and tech and all got along pretty well. But each member of the X-Men was completely different to one another, and it made it a lot of fun and gave it a lot of flair and colour. I also found Wolverine in the cartoon to be a total asshole, but that kind of made the character more alluring and badass. Anyway, the series was produced by Fox Kids, which is a division of 20th Century Fox, and Fox was so impressed with the cartoon and how successful it was, a live-action X-Men movie was once again back on track, with the movie rights being brought by Lauren Donner, who was the wife of Superman the movie director Richard Donner, and she was overlooking the production, with Richard Donner himself acting as executive producer. The funny thing is, both the first episode of the cartoon and the movie start off with a similar storyline, that being about a young female teenager who is a mutant who runs away from home feeling that her parents reject her differences. Only in the cartoon this character was Jubilee, and in the movie it was Rogue. But in the cartoon, Rogue was already a mature, confident member of the team. Oh well, it's not a big issue, but something that really stood out to me as a kid. Number 7. The absolute cluster of script rewrites. So in 1994, the first script for this new X-Men movie was written by Andrew Kevin Walker, who incidentally would go on to write 8mm. His script had similar elements to the final movie, in that it sees Wolverine joining the X-Men in order to stop Magneto and his takeover of Manhattan. Shutter Island scriptwriter Laeta Colagrides was then brought in to make rewrites, which added the element of Magneto trying to turn the whole of Manhattan into mutants. Then in 1996, Wonder Boy's author, Michael Chabon, approached 20th Century Fox with his own outline for an X-Men film series, in which the villains wouldn't feature in the story until the second movie, with the first movie focusing mainly on the Wolverine and Jubilee characters. His outline was rejected. Then also in 1996, Bill and Ted co-creator Ed Solomon was brought on board to also write a script. Then John Logan and James Schamus were then brought in to do further work on the script and to flesh out the characters more. Needless to say, the script writing process was a nightmare, and it seemed that 20th Century Fox weren't happy with any of the script attempts. In fact, things got so bad, Marvel comic book writer Chris Claremont, whom had written for the Uncanny X-Men comics, had to send a memo to the studio explaining the bare basics of the X-Men and who and what they are. Then the disastrous release of Batman and Robin happened, and that kind of put everyone off superhero movies. But thankfully, the following year, fellow Marvel character Blade got his own movie, which was successful, and managed to gain more confidence in the X-Men project.
Needless to say, trying to get a script off the ground for an X-Men movie was easier said than done.
Number 6. The director had a choice of this or an Alien movie. As much as 20th Century Fox was having difficulties with the script, they were equally having difficulties finding a director. The original choice was Brett Ratner, but nothing came of it. He did, however, direct the third movie. Then Robert Rodriguez was approached, but he also turned the job down. Paul W.S. Anderson was then offered to direct, thanks to his work on the Mortal Kombat movie, but he didn't want to make another PG-13 movie, but instead he wanted to get his hands dirty with a hard R, where he chose to direct Event Horizon instead. Bryan Singer came to be because after directing The Usual Suspects, he wanted to explore the science fiction genre. He offered his services to 20th Century Fox, and they offered him two choices, one being Alien Resurrection, and the other, of course, being X-Men. Singer chose X-Men, and with Singer on board as the movie's director, X-Men was intended to have a Christmas 1998 release. But Singer then went off to direct the Stephen King adaptation of Apt Pupil. However, Singer was still on board, where he and fellow scriptwriter Tom DeSanto then worked on a new outline, which focused on the themes of alienation, putting more of an emphasis on the characters. Instead of the main teenage runaway character being Jubilee, they wanted to make it Rogue instead, finding her inability to touch people to be truly symbolic of the alienation themes that he was striving for. Christopher McQuarrie, who worked with Singer and DeSanto on The Usual Suspects, was then brought in to work on the script for this outline. It was felt that this script's last act needed rewrites, where Joss Whedon was brought in, where he pretty much rewrote the script, even adding hints of the Dark Phoenix saga. This script was rejected. Eventually, Singer's assistant, David Hayter, made the final rewrites to the script, and despite the fact that he got sole writing credits, there are discrepancies as to the true creative resources behind the script. Hayter claims that 55% of what is seen in the film came from him, but there are claims that a great deal of the script came from McQuarrie and Solomon. Along the way, many characters would be added and removed from the script, such as Beast, who was originally meant to appear in the movie, to the stage where Industrial Light and Magic even started working on designs for the character, as well as other characters who would not make the cut, like Nightcrawler, the Blob, Juggernaut, the Sentinel robots, and at one stage the Danger Room was in the script, and then it wasn't in the script, and then it was in the script again. Yeah, look, the whole thing was a chaotic mess. And yes, as I mentioned in my Superman Returns video, I am talking a lot about Bryan Singer in this video. And yes, there are some not very good stories floating around about him. But for the sake of this video, I'm just going to be looking into the backstory of this movie, along with Bryan Singer's involvement constructively, while acknowledging that whether true or not, these stories are out there. So now that's out the way, let's continue with the episode. Number 5. Casting. When it came to casting the part of Professor Xavier, Patrick Stewart was always the number one choice for the part. Or, as I knew him back then, bald Star Trek dude, aka Picard. Michael Jackson supposedly really wanted the part and lobbied for it, but it fell on deaf ears. I guess the studio didn't want a Professor X who said Shamone. Ian McKellen was cast as the villainous Magneto, as he had previously worked with Singer on Apt Pupil. Both Stewart and McKellen are brilliant in their roles, and both come across as powerful leaders in charge of their own mutant sanctions, who, like chess pieces, send them out to counterattack the opposing side. Charlize Theron was originally offered the role of Jean Grey, but she didn't want to do it, so the part went to Dutch actress Famke Janssen, who at that time was probably best known for the Bond villain Onatopp from GoldenEye. Halle Berry was cast as Storm. At one stage in the script, her character was to have a romantic subplot with Wolverine, till it was written out. Sadly though, I don't think they quite knew what to do with the character once the romance element was gone, as she's just sort of there and doesn't really add much, and is often just in the background, which is a shame as Halle Berry plays the part really well and has great charisma. But who knows, maybe it's because there was just so many other characters to get through. Jim Caviezel was originally cast as Cyclops, but he turned the part down to star in Frequency instead, so James Marsden took his place, who at that time I think was something of a teen heartthrob, having appeared in the teen movies Disturbing Behaviour and Gossip, and I think he has a great dynamic superhero look. The part of Rogue was very important, as she was the main central character, with all the events of the movie revolving around her. Rachel Lee Cook was offered the role, but she turned it down, something that she would end up regretting. New Zealand actress Anna Paquin was then offered the part. Now, she had been acting ever since she was a kid, having starred in The Piano, where at the age of 11 she won an Academy Award, where she wore a truly memorable hat. And when she was offered the part of Rogue, she had already been cast in a teen drama called Tart. Okay? But she dropped out of that movie to star in X-Men instead. Good choice. Rebecca Romijn played the villainous Mystique, where she spends most of the movie as a blue mutant with some truly amazing makeup effects on display. She pretty much played the part with no clothes on, apart from some special effects makeup covering her bits. And Ray Park played Toad, whom 1 year earlier played the memorable villainous role of Darth Maul.
But we were missing one major important character. What about my boy Wolverine?
Number 4, the casting of Wolverine was a whole other ball game. So the biggest piece of casting when it came to X-Men would have been Wolverine. At that time, he was arguably the most popular character in the franchise. Now, in the production's very early days, Glenn Danzig was offered the part, but he was just too busy. When the production shifted to its current iteration, Russell Crowe was the number 1 choice for the part, but he declined, probably because he was too busy making Gladiator. But Russell Crowe was like, yeah, I can't star in this movie, but I've got a friend who will be excellent for Wolverine. And 20th Century Fox were like, oh, okay, who's that then? Do tell. And Crowe replied, an Australian actor called Hugh Jackman. To which 20th Century Fox were like, who the heck is Hugh Jackman? Yeah, nah, maybe not. Now, to be fair, at that time, Jackman was an unknown actor, who, apart from a few TV and theatre performances, had only really starred in 2 low-key Australian movies, those being Erskine-Bill King's and Paperback Hero. And 20th Century Fox wanted a better-known actor, a well-established actor who was bound to bring in movie audiences, not this Paperback Hero guy. Where the studio then cast Scottish actor Doug Ray Scott in the part, but he then dropped out to star in Mission Impossible 2 instead. Yeah, it seems that a lot of actors dropped out of this movie. I guess it goes to show that no one really had any faith in X-Men. Viggo Mortensen was Singer's number 1 choice, and he was tempted and even viewed some storyboards. But he ultimately didn't like the idea of having to commit to a multiple picture deal, so he was out. The movie shoot had started, and yet there was still no Wolverine. In fact, the filming had been taking place for 3 weeks. Yes, 3 weeks, till 20th Century Fox finally auditioned Jackman, where they were instantly impressed, and thus he was cast. And, well, what can I say? The guy was Wolverine. Yeah, he's not Canadian, and he's tall, going against Wolverine's original short stature, but he still embodied the character. And despite not being a star at the time, X-Men catapulted Jackman into huge international stardom.